Hey everyone, Brian Elliott with Focused Story Films here. I'm in my kitchen, a little bit different setup today because I want to test the chromatic aberration / green fringing issue on the Sony FX9 that a lot of us have experienced when you're in high contrast situations where chromatic aberration tends to appear. And I don't have that many windows in my apartment, so we've got my kitchen window back behind me. Right now I've got no lighting. This is just natural kitchen light, except for like the light that's on in my kitchen. So this is like if I showed up without any lights on set and I'm like, okay, here's an overexposed window. Right now I can see on my waveform monitor that the window is all clipping. So my guess based on other tests is that I will have some sort of green halo around my face. Not a wonderful, great thing. Let me walk back and forth, see if I can kind of make it appear or not. So very likely, and unfortunately, we did see that green halo. It may not be too bad because I believe I'm just overexposed in the background. I can still see a little bit of detail in the window, but it still does show up in those situations. I did some tests yesterday on my 35mm, 50mm, and 85mm Sigma Art lens. They all showed it. Right now I'm on the 50mm because that tends to show it a little bit more. It seems to be a lens with just a touch more chromatic aberration. So I wanted to test it in basically the worst case real world scenario where it's not that uncommon to have a subject with a window behind them or a window somewhere in the frame, even small, where you could get that green haloing effect that ruins your shot. So next I'm going to actually open this window so we get even more light and we're likely to see it even more. So let's go ahead and do that. And wait for it to find my focus again. And here I am. Fantastic. We'll see what we see. I'm sorry if you're like, what is he looking at? I've got my monitor right up there, so I'm seeing what I'm actually looking at. So apologies that my eyes are not like staring into your soul. Let's go ahead and do that little back and forth test again. My guess is we are going to see a lot of the green fringe. This is the type of lighting that tends to show it the most because we've got a completely blown out background and a relatively dark subject compared to the background. So we'll see, does it appear in my waving hand? Do we see it around my face, my ear, all that good stuff? I should mention that right now I've got Aperture turned off in the paint menu, which does help. If it's turned on, it tends to make the green fringing lines a lot thicker, a lot more noticeable. In some scenarios where they aren't necessarily going to show up here, they would show up if that was turned on. And now I'm going to turn on my lights and do these same tests with curtains open and curtains closed, with the room exposure balanced to the window exposure better, to see if that chromatic aberration artifacts go away. Spoiler alert, they should. In my previous test yesterday, they did, so my expectation is that as we balance the exposures, that's going to correct the problem. Okay, so now we're back. I've got an LED panel turned all the way up over here. I've got an LED panel behind me off to the side, and I should be relatively well exposed. The background is still clipping a little bit, so we may still see some of that chromatic aberration artifacting. I'll be very interested to see. This is with the window open, obviously. And obviously I am a little bit dark, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn the exposure up a little bit more and see what we're looking at if I'm properly exposed with some lighting. Okay, so now I am properly exposed, but the window is definitely still clipping. It's not clipping as badly as it was without the lighting, but we'll definitely see kind of what we see. I'd say with a camera without these issues, this would be what I'd consider a very acceptable shot. So we'll see kind of what we see. Fabulous. Now I'm going to close the window and adjust exposure as needed to get complete non-clipping of the highlights. All right, now we are not clipping at all. The lights can stay the same. The background is a little bit dark, but we'll see kind of what this is looking like, and then I'm going to adjust the lighting again to get a more evenly exposed shot. All right, so I have turned the lights down some. We're still pretty dark back there, which I think I'd need to add a couple more lights to really be able to make that work. But this is with the lights at about half power. So we should get actually a fairly similar result to what we got. But this is just one more test to see kind of what's going on if you don't want to be like blasting your talent with near as much light, but still want to maintain exposure. Or if you have to have your lights a little further away from your subject or things like that. One final test I wanted to throw at you guys is having a light in the background. That is something that I like to do sometimes in my shoots. I did it in a couple dance videos that I've done. Occasionally I just like to do it for a kind of extra pop. And I like to have practicals in my shots too, as well as sometimes these. Just depending on the look and feel of my video. So let's go ahead and see kind of what's going on with that as I walk backwards and forwards. Pay attention if you see any kind of chromatic aberration outline with this light. I will say, for me, I don't predict this to be necessarily a huge issue, unless when I moved in front of the light just then, I did get kind of the nasty haloing around my head, because a lot of times I do like to shoot like this where the lights are pretty far in the background, so they're not super distracting, but they're still giving you that pop of light. So we'll definitely see kind of what's going on. Obviously, for some of my recent YouTube videos, I've had a light basically like this and I haven't seen issues with it. But what I'm not sure of is like when I cross in front of it, you know, if my hand is here, am I going to start to see some of that fringing on the hand, or even reflecting, you know, on the shoulder, different things like that. So basically what I've learned from this test is even with aperture turned off, the FX9 still has the issue with the green fringing. Basically the only way that seems to be to make sure that it does not show up is don't clip anything in your shots, especially things that have harsh lines. I have shot a bunch of stuff recently where it was kind of in a situation similar to this, but I had to clip the blinds, but they were out of focus enough that there weren't sharp lines that the camera decided to kind of draw a line with, so it was okay. But I've also had scenarios where, you know, like the background was in focus, and I did get the harsh lines around the edges of the window or on the blinds or tracing around someone's head or different things like that. So it's definitely something that sometimes rears its head and sometimes doesn't, just based on the shot, the distance of your subject from the background, the level of overexposure, and just kind of the way that the chromatic aberration is. That's a whole different topic, one that's very deep and complicated, but kind of the main takeaway that I've got from this video is it's definitely still an issue on the FX9, and the only surefire way is to make sure that you're not overexposing your shot. Really pay attention to your waveforms and just make sure that you're composing in such a way that you're not clipping those highlights. It's a little bit of a handicap to the camera, but I also feel like it will make me a better cinematographer. Most of what I shoot, I have a lot of control over the lighting, so it's not going to be the biggest issue as long as I'm paying attention to what I'm doing. I hope that this test was helpful for you guys, and I will catch all of you later. Peace.